greatest injustice in the world today is that people could be born, live, and die and never even hear the name of Jesus.
And that's probably the tragedy of our day. And this is the world you and I live in, that 2,000 years after the cross and the resurrection, there are still two distinct ethne, the people groups of the Bible, the nations of the Bible, that have nothing.
Yeah.
They have no access to Jesus. And that's the responsibility we all bear.
Here's a confession. I mean, I was so into missions, and it wasn't until, I would probably say 8 years ago, that I didn't even realize that stat. And I love missions.
Yeah.
I mean, we're trying to send 500 missionaries from our church alone.
Right.
And when that stat was shared with me, I was shocked to my core.
What percentage of Christian giving and resources goes to those 40+%?
Only 1%.
Marketplace skills are missionary skills.
All right, we are here today with two dear friends. This is I'm calling this a pastor, a missionary, and a business guy have a conversation, right?
That sounded like the start of a joke.
It does sound like the start of a joke, doesn't it? So we had you guys in today for some meetings, and I could not let you be here at the Stone Table office and not have a conversation with you, and especially a conversation that we could share with other people. So this is going to kind of just be a rapid fire kind of thing. I think I just want to pull some wisdom and experience and stories from you guys. So I have Rob Ketterling, pastor of River Valley Church in Minneapolis, Twin Cities area, and also a member of the Stone Table Board of Directors.
Great
and then
to
we
be
have,
here.
I have my dear friend Dick Brogden, global leader of Live Dead and missionary. Told me I could use that term. And missionary all over Arab world amongst unreached people groups. And Dick has challenged me in incredible ways, and he's also responsible for putting me in some of the most uncomfortable positions of my life, which I'm very thankful for. So guys, I'm just glad we could have this dialogue today.
Likewise. And you may not know this, he was our first missionary.
Yeah.
Really?
30 years ago, I said, I want a good first missionary. Who should be our very first missionary we support? Dick and Jen Brogden.
I mean, he's done okay.
He's done fine.
Yeah, he's done all right. Yeah. That's a pretty good, prognostication.
If it was
on
a
your part.
stock, we're doing well. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks for taking just a couple minutes to talk about, I don't know, we'll just see where this goes. I'm just going to throw you some softball questions and we'll just see where the Lord leads. But I think, we talk a lot about this idea of calling. And Dick, in our breakfast this morning when we talked, you brought up this idea of calling and assignment, which I thought was really interesting. So before I press you guys on your own personal journeys, can you maybe unpack that for us a little bit?
Yeah, I think where we get in trouble is when we have too specified calling, because I think calling is general. And what I believe theologically is that every single follower of Jesus is called to Jesus and his glory amongst all peoples. That's a calling we share together. Under that calling, we have different assignments. So Rob's a pastor, I am a missionary. Under those assignments, we have different roles. I've done different things as a missionary in different places. Rob's done different things as a pastor. And the most fluctuation is at that tertiary level. So roles change a lot. Assignments change occasionally. Calling never changes.
Yeah.
It transcends geography. It transcends personality, transcends age. We are always called to Jesus and his glory amongst all peoples. The assignments will have some fluctuation over time.
Yeah.
And I think where that's helpful is, let's say there's a missionary called to Libya. If they think that's where they're called to, then a government issue, a civil war, a health issue, and then they're kicked out or they can't. They think, oh, what happened to my calling? Nothing. You're called to Jesus and his glory in all the earth. Go do it in Morocco. Or if the Lord leads you to go pastor, if the Lord leads you in the marketplace. So when you go from marketplace to missions or from pastoral to marketplace, your calling hasn't changed. Your calling is steady. You're always called to Jesus and his glory amongst all people.
I love that, Dick, because I had that experience in 2012. I had spent 12 years in full-time vocational ministry, and then all of a sudden found myself here renting apartments. Mm-hmm. And I remember those first few weeks, it's like my passion for Jesus is still the driving identifier of my life. So I went from preaching on Sundays to renting apartments on Mondays. Like, how do these two things go together? And the Lord spoke that to me so clearly. Like, your calling's the same. You just sit in a different seat now. But the global glory of Jesus is our calling.
Yeah.
And so I think we always try to encourage marketplace people with that, because they're like, I'm not called into ministry. And I think that calling versus assignment vocabulary is just really helpful.
I love it. And I've done that with staff, because they'll say, like, I'm called to be a youth pastor, or I'm like, nope, you're called for the global glory of Jesus. Like, and you're in ministry. So you're one of the fivefold. Okay, we get that. But your role is going to change. Your assignment is going to change. And even someday your location may have to change. And all those are movable. The first one isn't, the others are.
Right.
So if we're going to use that terminology of calling an assignment, like, when did the Lord kind of reveal your direction? I mean, maybe tell us a little bit of your personal story about how you've ended up in the assignment of pastor and in the assignment of missionary. So
Yeah. I was 15 years old on my first missions trip. I was in the Amazon jungle basin in Brazil, and I remember doing devotions, and I just remember so strong. I just wept, and I felt like God said, you're going to do this for me. You're going to be called into ministry. And I couldn't explain it. I was 15. I just knew that it was a moving moment. I came back and shared it with my parents, and they were like, okay. And I really wanted to be a doctor. That was the desire of my heart, was to be a doctor. And I even enrolled at ORU to be, for pre-med. I was going to go be a doctor.
Wow.
And it wasn't until a month before school started that I just felt God saying, no, I have called you to be a pastor. I thought it was pastor missionary. I didn't know. And actually for a while there, I thought it clearly was missionary. And then it turned out to be pastor that is sending missionaries and fueling missions.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, even now to this day, I'll still say to my wife, okay, we're still called, but should we move? Like, we should start a church in Bangkok. We should start a church. I mean, everywhere I go, I fall in love, and I just see the need. And I'm like, we should go. And she's like, we have our ministry. And until God calls both of us,
be careful saying that sitting next to Dick Brogden.
Trust me, I know. But she knows. Like, so that's how it happened.
Yeah.
And once I laid it down and said, I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a pastor or missionary or whatever you want me to be. And I've done youth pastor, lead pastor. I was a worship pastor for a while, and just have been able to move around in those positions. And I love where I am now. And I prayed this prayer: God, could I pastor one church my entire life? I'm 30 years in on one church for my life. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Love hearing a little bit of that. I mean, so Dick, what about you? Like, when did you know your assignment was going to be the global mission field?
So backing up one step, I knew calling when I was 16, looking at the stars in the heavens. And Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. There is no language or speech that hasn't gone. And that's where I settled that whatever I did assignment-wise, I wanted to live for the glory of Jesus amongst the nations. I thought, if stars can glorify him, how much more the crown of his creation, which are all the peoples of the earth. So calling was settled at 16. Then I went to North Central Bible College at the time, and I loved Africa, and God gave me a heart for Muslims and prayer, and I liked to battle. I like a fight, so I wanted to pioneer. I didn't want to go where there was a church or Christians. I wanted to go where there was nothing. And so the assignment was actually worked out through some of the loves that the Lord had put in my heart. And as those loves coalesced, it showed me what my assignment was.
That's really cool. That is really cool. I think, I wrestled with that a lot as a kid. We'd go to summer camp, and they'd always have called into ministry night at summer camp. And, we would all pray and go like, am I called? Am I called? Am I called? Yeah. And I always left those, services going, no, I guess I'm not called. And I understand what we were doing in those moments. We were trying to spark, a passion for people to go into full-time ministry or full-time missions. But I do think if we're not careful with that language, we can end up creating a bifurcation that we don't intend to create. And I remember telling people, no, I didn't get the call, right? I didn't get the call. I'm just going into the marketplace. And so I love hearing these stories of you personally, but I also just love kind of framing, even for marketplace people, to say the global glory of Jesus belongs to all of us, right? And we all sit in different seats on that bus, or on, as you like to say, the apostolic spear, right, Dick? But we all own that calling. So let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about maybe distractions. And Rob, I want to. I mean, your heart and passion for missions at River Valley, I mean, is known world over. I've never been to a church that is as passionate for missions, I don't think, as you are. I grew up in a church that I tell people was global missions obsessed, but you guys have taken it to like another level, right? It's what you've really built the church around, right? So tell us what has, you can tell us a little bit about what has created that for you in River Valley, but what is distracting us now from that passion as the church?
Yeah, that was a loaded question there. I mean, when I saw outside my circle of my county, Dakota County, and I actually went on my first missions trip, it woke me up to, wait, there are cultures and people that need to know. There are people that have never heard the gospel. Yeah. And when I was awakened to that, I couldn't shake it. I just couldn't be like, go back to normal. That was part one. Part two then was like, I just feel an obligation. If 42% of the world has not had an adequate witness of Jesus Christ, like, I'm not going to rest on that. I'm going to keep trying to bring the message out. And then I understood lostness versus access. And yes, my neighbor's lost, but they have access. They drove by 15 churches this morning, but they have no access. And so that's why our church has been consumed on it. There have been all sorts of prophetic things spoken over us, and that's why our church is so focused. But even as focused as we are, there's still the drift. And I put it down to there's toys, because we're so affluent. There's tournaments. People love sports and they travel all around the world for their kids and get distracted. And there's travel. And it's like 3 T's that they're consumed with. And then it's not another T, maybe it's treasures, because they're so consumed with, I don't have as much as them. And so instead of being about giving to missions and staying on mission, we start living to have as much as them. And all these T's are distracting the local church. And if we can, like I told our kids, the world does not revolve around your sports. It revolves around building the church. And we're not going to make it to every game. And if there's a practice on Sunday, you're not going, because it doesn't revolve around your sports. It revolves around building the kingdom.
That's good.
And so, but the church is really distracted. And I think the what about us is very prevalent. And that same creep is missions creep is even in Luke, where Jesus tells the story of the prodigal son. The guy at the wedding feast, or at the feast with Jesus, he's uncomfortable about the way Jesus is teaching, and he goes, blessed are those who eat at the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he was saying, here's to us. We're in. We're going to heaven with God. We're going to paradise. And Jesus immediately goes to the lost sheep. Lost sheep, lost coin. And and he's like the lost son. And he's like, his heart is for the lost. And instead of saying, aren't we glad that we're in? He was like, aren't we glad that we're on mission for the King? Yeah. And so I've just lived with that in our church of, let's not get inward focused. Let's be, here's to those that are not yet here.
Yeah.
Live that life.
Yeah, to look at the table and say who is not represented here yet, right?
Yeah. And I'm crying, and my church teases me. They said, whenever you talk about missions, you cry.
That's beautiful.
It's our heart. If you cut us open, our heart is global.
Yeah, and I love that. Dick, talk to us a little from your perspective as a missionary. What's distracting us? What's distracting us?
So arrogance and insecurity are manifestations of the same problem, which is pride. If missions in the past was plagued by arrogance, which led to paternalism and colonialism and imperialism, now within our American context, we're so broken and we're so fragmented increasingly as a culture that I think there's the insecurity of, man, I'm too broken to be a missionary. And the difference is, in missions, there's a misnomer. Sometimes people think we're going to teach. What if we're going to learn? And if we're going to learn, then our brokenness is something the Lord can use. But if we're going to teach, if we have to have all the answers, if
Yeah.
we're the solution, then brokenness does disqualify us. So I think where we could make the turn and perhaps pivot is if we could bring our insecurities to the Lord along with our arrogance and let the cross deal with both, then we can be fitted for service within these difficult contexts around the world. So I would say our church is increasingly broken, and so much attention then to the local or to the self. And that's a consequence of secularism as well. But if we could just get self off of the throne, put Jesus back on the throne, he could work with our brokenness. And we can go as learners into his fields. And from that posture of humility, still add a lot of value.
It's good. I'm going to go a little off book here because let's talk about just some missions basics here, because I just think there's some things people don't quite understand, and you guys have swerved into them. But I mean, let's talk about 42% unreached around the world. What does that mean when we say unreached? When we talk about gospel access, I mean, can you guys unpack that a little bit for people who might be watching this?
I'm looking at you. Bro, here's a confession. I mean, I was so into missions, and it wasn't until I would probably say 8 years ago that I didn't even realize that stat. And I love missions. I mean, we're trying to send 500 missionaries from our church alone.
Right.
And when that stat was shared with me, I was shocked to my core. And then when I started doing the math, I was like, sorry.
It's okay.
Then when he started doing the math, I was like, how do we make it from 42 to 41?
Yeah.
And I got discouraged. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to do what I can and pray for miracles. So I just want you to know, if somebody doesn't know this, and I'd love for you to explain it, but I mean, I didn't know, and I was in love with missions and didn't know that.
Yeah. Can you unpack that for us?
All right. So the global population right now is 8 billion. Of those 8 billion, 7 billion are what we call lost. Of those 7 billion that are lost, 3.9 billion are what we call unreached. And the difference between unreached and lost, is what Pastor said, is the access issue. 3.9 billion people around the world don't know how to find out about Jesus, even if they wanted to. And so that number is only growing because of global populations. And so if you're a competitive person, this really should bother you, because we're actually losing. We're losing ground. We're not staying up with birth rates. And an unreached people group is defined two ways. One, numerically, less than 2% evangelical. And the other one is qualitatively, meaning they're so few, so marginalized, so persecuted, or so afraid they can't reach their own. So really it's higher than 42%. But 3.9 billion people around the world are in this category of they just don't have adequate access to Jesus. And there's a subcategory within unreached, which is particularly worrisome, and that's what we call the unengaged. And that's a people group. People group has their own language, culture, religion, and space. But 2,000 of them don't even have a church or a missionary or a Bible school or even Christians that we know of. And that's probably the tragedy of our day. And this is the world you and I live in, that 2,000 years after the cross and the resurrection, there are still two distinct ethne, the people groups of the Bible, the nations of the Bible, that have nothing. They have no access to Jesus. And that's the responsibility we all bear.
Yeah. And I think, I hear people say a lot, why should we care about people around the world when we've got lost people right here in our own communities? And I think, Rob, I've heard you talk about this, but I think we've created an either-or equation. And it needs to be both and. And I think what you just said, Dick, is so key, because yes, we have lost people in our own communities, but they've driven by 15 churches on their way to work today, right? We're here. And there are places in the world that have no one, that have no one there, that where you can be born, live, and die without ever as much as meeting another believer, let alone hearing someone unfold the gospel to you in a way that you can understand. And so this is what I want people to understand here. Yes, we care about our neighborhood. Yes, we care about our workplaces. Of course. I mean, it's huge. We talk about that all the time here at the Stone Table. But all of us need to own, I call it the greatest injustice in the world today. The greatest injustice in the world today is that people could be born, live, and die and never even hear the name of Jesus. And so, Dick, I've heard you say too, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, but of all of the 3.9 billion people, 40+% of the global population is unreached with the gospel. And what percentage of Christian giving and resources goes to those 40+%?
Only 1% of all Christian giving and only 3% of all Christian missionaries. And that is a sobering fact that most of our money and most of our personnel are going to where there are already Christians, already churches. And so the pronouns, even in your illustration, we, our community, we are there in our communities.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah.
But there are so many communities without the we, without the us, without any believers in Jesus. So no one is saying that all missions money should go to the unreached. But if 42% of the world is unreached, shouldn't 42% of our personnel and our finances go there? Not 1%? Something's wrong there.
Yeah, and the extra problem there is those are really difficult places to go, right?
And that touches on the issue because we want bang for our buck. We want to give $100 and see 100 people get saved, and we want to see that in 1 week. But what if it takes 10 years for one person to get saved and that costs $1 million? We're not so excited about those numbers.
Right. Rob, how do you preach this to your congregation? I mean, how do you instill this in their heart?
Yeah, because it's not an either or. We've said it's both. I once had a youth pastor. He said to me, he goes, "I'm more of a local. I don't have the heart for the world." I said, "Wrong answer. Right? They are not exclusive." So what we've had to do is keep it in front of them because they're not aware. Keep them focused on mission. We've had to present missionaries over and over again. We've had to have this culture that calls for sacrifice and giving and generosity and going. We'll do 60 trips this year, which it sounds crazy, but we do. And we're trying to keep constant. Like you said this, you were raised in a church that baked you in the Great Commission.
Slow baked in the Great Commission, man.
That's us. We're just slow baking them in the, I mean, even our missionaries that will do a 5-spot, they go in and talk to the kids and we're starting young with that. And so it's just constantly keeping it in front of them. Yeah.
So of course you're encouraging people to care about their neighbors in the Twin City area, right?
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
we have to reach the people that are all around us each and every day, right? And I have the conviction we all ought to be talking about Jesus a whole lot more than we are. So it's like, I only talk about Jesus when I go on a, cross-cultural missions trip. I mean, I think we need to encourage people, reach your neighbors, build relationships at your workplace, all of those things, but gospel access, right? Gospel access. We have to.
And the reality is if you prioritize the local, you don't automatically get the far.
Right.
But if you prioritize the most difficult places and peoples of the world, the Lord blesses that and you get the local as well.
So I don't know how this question will land, but what would you say to the average Christian? I guess what is something the average Christian dramatically underestimates about their role in the Great Commission?
Well, I love, again, that spear illustration that he used. I don't think they realize that every piece is needed. They got to think of it like the military. There's somebody who drives, and there's somebody who supplies the fuel lines, and there's somebody, and they don't realize that it takes everybody doing their part. And they look at what I would say the flashy parts and say, well, I'm not that, so I'm not. No, you're in the process.
Yeah.
And so I think they underestimate that right there. And then I think we also underestimate the power of like a million small good ideas or good deeds or good, you know what I mean? Small obedience, compounded.
Yeah.
The more I travel, the more I realize like compounding good of the church, what it's doing. So I think they get distracted by that and get discouraged.
Yeah. I love that. One of the analogies I love because I'm a Colts fan. Love NFL football. But have you ever seen like when a quarterback throws a pass to a wide receiver and he's on the 2-yard line and the defense like stands them up, right? And they're trying to run to the end zone and the defense like stands them up. And then all of a sudden one of the other players runs over and gets behind the guy who has the ball. And then the other guy runs over. And then all of a sudden you've got this big scrum of all and the big uglies, the offensive linemen come over and they start to push the pile right over the goal line. I like to imagine even marketplace believers that way. It's like we think, the missionary, the guy who's catching the ball is the only guy who's important, but like all of us need to get behind and push, and all of us have a role, in that.
All of us do, except for the Eagles and their
yeah. That's when the analogy breaks down.
Yeah, broke down. I was struggling with that, but no, you're right.
I was going to say the New England Patriots, but that's an argument for another podcast. Yeah. So Dick,
right.
What would you say? Just a marketplace believer, an accountant who just gets up and goes to work every day, loves Jesus, but it's like I don't. What do I do? Like, how do I engage?
Yeah, I love your analogy, and I thought of a piano player trying to do a minuet with 3 fingers, But how God designed this it is so beautiful, and it's such a rich mosaic, not only of all the peoples of the world, but how all the different variegated parts of the church engage. We don't get the sweet music unless we have all of our fingers playing, even our pinkies.
Yeah.
So I have a friend, his name's Bob Stock. He's a Harvard graduate, and he went into corporate America. But Bob Stock lives, eats, and breathes unreached people groups. If you took him away from him, he'd die. He would wither up and die because he loves Jesus so much, and he loves the nations. He has never been called to be a missionary. He's been in corporate America all of his life.
Yeah.
And now he's retired. He's a missions chair at his church, and he does prayer meetings, and he's training missionaries to go. So he's never, ever, ever left corporate America, but he has lived his whole life for the glory of Jesus amongst the nations, with the priority on the unreached. And it's such a beautiful picture of what I think Jesus wants for every marketplace person.
Yeah.
Whether in our prayer, whether in our finances, whether in our sending or discipling others. But I think every person in the marketplace can live wherever they are in the world for the global glory of Jesus. And when they do, it is enriching not only to them, but everyone around them.
Ah, so beautiful.
We had John Bevere speak at our men's event, and he talked about you're going to give account to what God called you to be. He said there's so many people that are running businesses that want to be pastors, and he's like, or pastors that want to run businesses. And he said, you're going to stand before God for what he called you, the lane he wanted you. Don't get upset. Like, flourish in the lane you were created for. It ministered to all of our guys, because I had guys saying, the only way I can make a difference is if I quit my job and join Pastor Rob on the staff. And afterwards, they're like, wait, I can glorify God by running my business, having that sphere of influence there, having an influence in the community for the gospel, and raise great resources for the gospel. And they're like, I'm on this team. And it really set them free, because I don't know, I hear from guys all the time, I think I just want to quit my job and join them. I'm like, no, we work hard too. Go where your lane is, do what you're called to do, and let's do this together.
Yeah, almost like, I've wasted 40 years of my life in the marketplace, and so maybe the Lord will let me in the last 5 years of my life do something that really matters for him, right?
Right.
And I think we've just got to get people thinking differently, not only about how they approach their work every day, but just that they are part of this calling to the glory of Jesus amongst the nations. Really, really good. Just a couple more questions. Dick, where are we seeing opportunities for marketplace people in missions? Because I think sometimes too, people are like, I'm a business guy, I'm an accountant, I'm an engineer, I'm not a Bible school graduate. I would never have a place in missions. And I think you're seeing something completely different happening out there. Talk to us about opportunities.
So the places that remain unengaged with the gospel are not conducive for those who have seminary degrees or reverend in front of their name. In fact, missionary or church-related visas are impossible to get in many of these countries. Therefore, the best prepared people to go into these countries that need creative access are those who have marketplace experience, whether that is taking a job as being a teacher at a university in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, or whether that's starting something like doing a coffee farm in China.
Yeah.
So there are so many opportunities for marketplace people to actually gain access into these places that a traditional minister cannot access. So what a wonderful kind of convergence we have here in our day, as the marketplace man and woman realize that everything they have done is a preparation for them to be able to give gospel access into Somalia, into Libya, into Syria, into Afghanistan. If we can have this awakening, we will, by God's grace, be able to present Jesus to hundreds, thousands of people groups that never have heard of him.
Yeah. Rob, I know we always like to talk about more ways for business people and marketplace leaders to be involved beyond just giving. But I don't want to shy away from giving. I don't want to shy away from generosity. And this is huge for you. So if there are business people out there watching this or seeing a clip of this, what do you say to your high capacity business people when it comes to how they use their resources to fulfill the Great Commission?
Yeah, I mean, because, well, it reminds me of a teaching that I did for our church. I said, we need you to serve when we're gathered, okay? Yeah. And when we're gathered together, we need you to be an usher, greeter, this. Everybody needs to do something when we're gathered. But don't stop there. We want you to serve where you're gifted. I said, if you run a company, don't just park cars for us on Sunday. Say, how can I bring my gift into the church to help us fulfill the Great Commission? Yeah. And then the third one would be in your generosity. How can you leverage and live differently with your generosity to move the needle? And so I think I'm shocked when I see these high-level people and they're driving the golf cart at their church and they think serving the king, you are technically, but way underperforming for the gifts and talents that he's given you.
Yeah.
So serve the king with your gifts and talents in the church. If you're a lawyer, if you're a media producer, whatever it is that you do, use that talent for the church as well, without charge. I mean, what a great way to help. And then also leverage the gift that you have to make wealth to fuel the Great Commission. And that's very biblical. I look at Luke talks about the 3 ladies that supported the ministry.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that he talked about Jesus didn't just always make, gold in the coin, gold coins in the mouth of the fish. He was these ladies paid the bills. And so I'm can you pay the bills? Can you use your gifts? And can you also, when we're gathered together, just don't stop driving the golf cart. You know what I mean?
So maybe just a last question here. Dick, from your seat, what would you say to a Christian business person, entrepreneur, who sincerely wants to leverage their life, their influence, and their resource for the global glory of Jesus? I mean, how would you encourage them?
I would ask them to begin praying for an unengaged people group. They can do that at doxa.life. You can sign up for one. I would encourage them to leverage their gift, as Rob said, and their assets for gospel access amongst that people group, whether that's opening a branch of their company, whether that's supporting missionaries who go to that people group, whether that's offering some type of business covering for those who are engaging in that area. And Stone Table can resource them. But I would say, rather than just being super generalist, is there one unengaged people group that you could change their history forever? So even as you've been creative within your sector, could you then take all that creativity and leverage it so that you can't change the world, but you could change the destiny of one unengaged people group? Would you pray about that, research that, and then see what you could do to change the forever of that people group?
Yeah. I'm really interested in something that you just said there, because you talked about some practical ways, and I don't want to gloss over that, because I'd like to give some practicality. I mean, obviously, when we think about BAM, we think about entrepreneurship and actually starting a business in another country. But you talked earlier about, taking a job in a difficult place, working in the oil industry in Saudi Arabia, or some people could maybe have a job that is portable. And, maybe they could do that job here, they could do it in California, or they could do it, in North Africa.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's another way to go.
Yep.
But you also said, if you have a successful business here, could you franchise that? Could you open an office of your successful business in a hard to reach place. Can you press into that a little bit?
Yeah.
I mean,
one of the challenges we have right now is we have a huge workforce emerging from the global south, from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America, but they don't always have the resources to be able to enter these difficult countries. But if a businessman in the States would franchise his business and create, even if it's an office or a logistical center or some kind of freelance option, but then look at intentionally hiring these men and women within the profession that are gifted from the global south so that they would have credible professional identity in these contexts. This could be a huge way for us to have gospel access where it hasn't existed.
Yeah, and so maybe if you're out there and you're listening to this and you're like, I've got a successful business here, and I mean, absolutely, we could open a branch in some other part of the world that is void of gospel access. I mean, reach out to us here at the Stone Table. We'll connect the dots for you. So, Rob, let's press into this a little bit with you as well. I mean, what would you say? You're sitting across from an entrepreneur, a business owner, or a business leader in your church, and they sincerely want to leverage their life and influence for the Great Commission. What are you saying to them?
I'm copying that right there. I mean, seriously. No, because I'm saying those types of same things. Like, how can you leverage this for the kingdom of God? What can you do more? I've had guys say to me, like, I've got all the money I need and I'm thinking about retiring. I'm like, but could you work for 3 more years and give it all to the kingdom? If you already, knowing what you make, and if you did 3 more years, that'll move the needle, and you could literally be working for the Great Commission, just giving the resources. That's a challenge. Or it's, can you take your skill set and can you bring it somewhere else? We have a lot of people that do BAM in our church that do business as mission, and we have a lot of people doing that, and even buying properties and places and assets and doing that. But we haven't had anybody start a franchise yet. I love that.
If I can brag on what he just said, and it happened with Rob's blessing, but a business guy in his church bought an investment property in one of our unreached countries, allows us to use it for ministry purposes. And it's a huge blessing. It saves us on operational costs. So that's just even a very simple, practical thing. And the businessman still owns it, and it will return to him, 20 years from now.
Right.
And the Lord will bless that value increase on his property. But in the meantime, we're getting decades of ministry use out of this very critical center in the Middle East.
I think there's something huge there.
And I'm just into now things too. Here's what I would say to the businessman. They all think, I'll work and I'll make money and I'll do my thing, and then someday I'll give it to God. Okay? And I'm like, nowadays give it to God, because he promises 30, 60, or 100-fold, and you're putting into the kingdom economy. And what are you holding back? Like, what is $1 worth today in the Great Commission versus $1 10 years from now? And so I'm like, get it into the kingdom as fast as possible, and you'll get more. Don't keep like, I don't want to say bet on yourself, but they are. Don't bet on yourself and your gifts. Get it into the kingdom. And so that's what I would tell them. And then get around other people that think the same way. I share the story of Stone Table all the time. And I tell our business people, like, from an idea, like at breakfast, 2 guys have turned this into a multi-million-dollar generosity factory for the kingdom. And I'm like, what are you dreaming about? What are you dreaming about for the kingdom? And use your creativity. Go for it.
Yeah, and I don't want to insult any of our founders because they are brilliant guys. One of them happens to be my father, But I think they would tell you, like, we didn't know whether this, we're not some like brilliant strategists here. We just saw an opportunity and stepped into it and said, how can we use this for the global glory of Jesus? And as I look back on it, I don't see us. I've been in leadership here for almost 14 years now, and all I can tell you is we've just been faithful to make sure this belongs to the Lord. The breath on it has come from Him, and so that's what I would say to anybody out there is just that posture, that open-handed posture to say, I've got assets, I've got business skills, I've got these things, and Lord, I want to use them so that the nations can know Jesus. I'm not saying you won't go through difficult seasons, because I can tell you some really, really hard seasons, but I can tell you, you can rest assured when you go to bed at night that you are living in alignment with the desire and the will of God.
Yeah.
So, any last thoughts, guys, that you would want to share?
Well, I would like to take 3 minutes. Can I take 3 minutes?
Yes, you can.
And do a canonical review, because I think there's a misnomer understanding fire and determination, and that makes sense in a moment. So Abraham, Genesis 12, he is told he'll be a blessing to all the nations of the world. After that determination, Genesis 15, God appears in Epiphany, a flaming pot of fire, and walks through the covenant pieces. Samson's parents are told that their son would deliver the people from the Philistines. This is a mission statement. After that, the angel ascends in fire. Elijah, he makes a determination to stand for God before 400 prophets of Baal and 450 of Asherah. So it's a mission's determination. After that, the fire falls. Solomon dedicates the temple, and he says this will be a place for all the nations to come if the foreigners. After that, the fire falls. The 3 Hebrew guys, we're not going to bow to these idols. That's before 127 different nations in this great empire. After that, the 4th man in the fire, all the way to Pentecost. And somehow we have got into our heads that the fire fell, and then there was a determination to reach the nations. But they'd been commissioned to reach every nation, and between Passover and Pentecost, every day the Jewish people would pray Psalm 67, let the nations be glad, let all the peoples praise you. They knew the deal. So they'd come to the upper room, and it wasn't waiting for a determination. They determined to reach the nations. Peter, you in? Yeah. Andrew, you in? Yeah. Philip, let's do this. And then the fire falls.
Wow.
We have a misunderstanding that we're kind of waiting as business guys or marketplace for the fire to fall on us, and then we'll make this determination to reach the nations.
Yeah.
Or in the churches, wait for revival, then we'll send missionaries. But what if it's the other way around? What if we make a determination, we're going to live for the glory of Jesus, and then the fire falls? Because Jesus is so happy, he sends the fire on our businesses or the fire in our church. So my heart and plea to everybody in the marketplace is, go ahead and make the determination. Live for the glory of Jesus. You do that, and the fire will fall.
Oh, that's so good.
Did you preach that on Pentecost Sunday?
I did.
I was like, that's good.
That's good. So Rob, I'll leave you with the same question, and you get to follow that from Dick. What would you say? I mean, just any thoughts in closing that somebody who might be hearing this, because again, we talk to a lot of marketplace people who are believers and just want their life to count. Like, well, what would you say?
Yeah. I'm thinking about something with pastors, and then I'll go to marketplace.
Yeah.
Because with pastors, I keep saying, dream a big enough dream and vision for the amount of resources God has placed in your church. Because the business leader is saying, does my church have a vision big enough for the resources God has asked me to steward? And I see a lot of frustrated business people that are like, my church doesn't have a vision. Like carpet, keep the lights on, And I think pastors need to live on vision, because those people are going to have to be good stewards of they're going to have to give account for what they have and use for his glory.
Yeah.
So help them.
Yeah.
Pastors should do that. And then business leaders, don't play catch me if you can. Aggressively bring your gift. Like I can't imagine if I was in the marketplace. Sorry, I get kind of choked about this too. If I was in the marketplace and I played coy with my church of call me, ask me when you need something, let me know if I like it. I wouldn't do that. I would be like, these are the resources that I have that God has asked me to steward. How can we partner together? And here's how much I want to give. I would take that posture. Now, I know most don't, but I do have families in my church that do that. They say, we're going to live differently, and here's what you can count on. How can we change the world together? Makes all the difference. They didn't start their own foundation. They actually brought their gifts into the local church and said, how can we use this for God's glory? And how can we use our gifts? And so I would say to the marketplace leader, please don't sit back and wait. Like your pastor might even be intimidated by the resources you have.
Yeah.
And bring the provision for the vision, and let's get this world changed. The other day, my son asked me, he said, you all say you have $250 or $250 million worth of vision. Like if somebody came to you, he goes, write it down. And so I wrote it down, all the things that I would do. And by the time we were done, he goes, it's almost 500 million. And I was like, I know. And he's like, people need to hear that and know that there's vision in your heart to do that. And they can bring these resources in and we can change the world together.
Yeah.
So don't sit on the periphery and wait to be engaged. Fight your way into being engaged in the church and using your gifts. Like, you will give an account, not for the fact, like, did your pastor ask you, but what did you do with it? Like, and so I would fight my way into using my gifts and talents for the glory of God. I couldn't sit by and just wait. Couldn't do it.
Pastor Rob Ketterling, missionary Dick Brogden, thank you for the honor of having this conversation with you today. I'm honored to call you both friends, and thank you for just leading the way and challenging and encouraging all of us that the nations matter to Jesus, and that if we build our lives and our ministries and our businesses around that, we have no idea what God is capable of doing. So what an honor to talk with you guys today. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Our privilege.